So it's good to have the conversation, I guess, and try to influence those decisions.
Yes.
We're right on time. Looks like we've got pretty good attendance right away. We've got quite a few things to get through. So I think we'll kind of get going right away. It's a couple minutes after, so I think that's fair. Thanks everybody for making time to attend. Really appreciate it. And for your interest in collectively purchasing energy. I'm really hoping that we can find a way to reduce our costs this way and find some innovative solutions that are really growing, proliferating in the world out there. And collectively, I think we'll be able to access some of those, more easily and at lower cost. So that's why we're all here. Not everybody could attend. Sorry, I could have tried to schedule a couple more meetings. I'm going to try to meet with folks on their own and see if we can bring in conversations that way as well. But this is definitely a core part of the group, so appreciate that. I think to start out, what we'll want to do is just go around the room. It's always valuable to understand who's here and kind of where you're coming from for an institutional perspective. I think we're getting to know each other pretty well, but there might be some new faces here as well. So yeah, I'm Donald Jansen. I've been coordinating the Sustainable Campus Collaborative. We've tried to push forward some initiatives, listen to folks, what's happening out in your institutions, and be able to share that so that we can all learn. And so we meet quarterly to discuss those things. This is an initiative that came out of some conversations with some of our members. I think Bow Valley College and Northwest College both had a real interest in collectively purchasing energy and potentially going in a renewable kind of direction. And I think that's a real core part of what this is. But the highest priority is to really reduce costs, make sure we, from what I've heard from most folks. So yeah, looking forward to talking about that today. So I'll just kind of go around the group that as they show up on my screen. Thomas Watts, you want to give a bit of an overview, Grand Prairie and your perspective, what you'd like to get out of this?
Yeah, you bet, Donald. I mean, I think like everyone else in the room, costs just keep escalating. I think when I was looking at our carbon tax bills alone last year, I mean, we're not a large institution, but creeping up on that $150,000 mark just on gas alone. So we are striving to find ways to cut costs, exploring different things, geotherm and whatnot. And this coming across the table is actually timely. I'm not sure exactly what the timing will look like, Donald. I know we're locked in until November of 23 in a contract with TransAlta right now, which we are definitely well into the money on, thankfully. But I'll be curious to see what the timing looks like for this going forward.
That's an excellent point. Thanks for bringing that up, Thomas. I think that the way we look at it, we can actually layer in whenever contracts come up, because all of our contracts are totally different where how they're structured and when they're going to come up. And so our analysis, our process would be to take that into account, and as the contracts come up, that would be negotiated kind of explicitly to ensure that demand then and that consumption requirement is met. So that's completely expected in a part of the process and can be taken into account, and still drives our total volume, which means we can negotiate better contracts. So that's excellent. It's good to hear, and that actually is very timely. I think it might be often the case that it might be 5 years out that some contracts may come up. So I think that's perfect. Amy.
Morning, everyone. I'm Amy Spark. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator at Bow Valley College. I work with Charlene, who's also on the call. Interesting note around the carbon tax, similar to Thomas. I was looking at what it's costing us, and I extrapolated it out to 2030, recognizing it's going to keep going up. And if we don't change anything, we're anticipated to pay about 350,000 in carbon tax alone by 2030. So that's interesting to just keep in mind. Wanted to share. And yeah, similar to, I think, what other folks in the room are interested in exploring around reducing costs and especially reducing our scope 2 emissions, because just looking at our scope 1 and 2 emissions, electricity makes up 83% or something like that. So it's a primary part of our operational emissions, and that's really why we're looking at trying to purchase renewable. So maybe Charlene, do you want to go next if you're free?
Amy, I think you covered everything. You did great.
Yeah, and that's excellent analysis. And I think that, 350,000 is absolutely a huge number, but, it's a proportion of your budget as well that's kind of relevant. So I'm sure that's a huge proportion. And it's a cost that's going, nowhere. I mean, I think it's a valuable way of doing things. We don't need to get into the politics of it, but it's going to be a huge cost and a proportion of costs. And if we can avoid that, I think, it's a big savings. That money can go into other priorities. So really appreciate that point. Michael.
Thank you very much, Donald. Michael Brunice in Alberta Public Schools. Not wanting to be repetitive of anything anyone's already said. I think they've summed it up well. But just to reemphasize, a lot of uncontrollables with carbon tax, franchise fees, and so forth that are adds on. Well, in addition to not only the price and the volume used of each respective utility commodity. So happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks for being able to come here on such short notice. And yeah, we look forward to your participation. Lots of experience with these types of collective contracts. So I really appreciate that. From the Edmonton Public School Board, can we go with Darlene, please? Oh, maybe you're not quite available. Daryl, you can speak on school board's behalf, please.
Morning, everyone. I think Darlene might be having audio trouble, so I'll speak for us. Edmonton Public Schools. Well, we're a big energy user. We have some pretty big contracts in place. We pay some pretty massive carbon tax, of course. My interest would be how can we see some of that money returned? It was supposed to be every sector that paid into this levy was supposed to be able to apply for that money back so that we could apply for, it to green programs. That has not happened. And I would like to see the heft and might of this group band together and ask with one strong voice, where is the money? So other than that, yes, of course, we want to try to control costs and green our energy supplies. And we are going to be going out for electricity in the next year. And we're looking at all options that are available to us.
Excellent. I really appreciate that point, and I look forward to exploring that with you afterwards. Ways that we can leverage, like you say, this group to apply and double dip in a sense. If we can reduce our costs and then also be able to apply for funding to help leverage that, that would be could be a huge benefit financially and operationally. So that I'll be looking into that with you. Thanks. Stephen from McEwen, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, McEwen faces the same challenges as everybody else. We've locked into fairly reasonable rates for our electricity, but our gas costs, we're still trying to, get a much better bang for our buck for our natural gas costs. And, we're exploring various opportunities. And of course, this collective group, may be the answer that we need. I do like Daryl's comment on, we as a collective may be able to put a whole lot more pressure on the governments, the powers that be, for some of these rebates that we were expecting to come back to our institutions and we have not seen yet.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And what I see as too is taking that type of an approach. There may be some institutions that, you know, for whatever reasons, operational reasons, aren't able to sign on immediately to the collective in terms of their purchasing. But if they can sign on, you know, to support that kind of an effort, collectively, we may be able to have an impact. And what's interesting about that is, I mean, we have members, basically every institution across Alberta, but we also have significant interest from Saskatchewan and from Ontario. And so a collective voice only becomes stronger, particularly with the federal government. So that's a great point. Appreciate that. Jason Schuler at Northwest.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, so Jason with facilities team here at Northwest. So again, same boat as everybody else. Definitely interested to see if we can get that critical mass to kind of go to the next stage here on this business case. So Northwest is definitely in. I kind of met with our VP and director earlier this week, and they're definitely supportive. So we've got, I guess, a little more traction internally here. So yeah, we're just ready to kind of move to that next step, I guess.
Excellent. I appreciate that forward-looking perspective and you know, your support. It's been really important. You've brought up the possibility of doing this, and that really appreciate that. And I think that to some degree, we may be a bit of a test case. And the more that we can prove that this works on a number of different levels, we can see it work, then we'll get even more interest and be able to have greater savings. So really appreciate you taking this time. Earl at the University of Calgary.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Earl Badger, Director of Energy and Utilities at the University of Calgary. And we're probably in a little different position, it sounds like, than most participants here, in that we have a couple of cost containment programs that are pretty well developed and have been working well for us. On the utility cost side, we have a financial instrument, a contract for difference, which we run, that helps with the pricing. And then on the carbon tax, we're large enough that we've opted into the tier program. So we're shielded a little bit through the tier program. So our interest really is not around the cost containment for either the utilities or the carbon tax, but really it's around getting a long-term supply agreement for renewable zero carbon energy. Because as we move forward, we're looking at, you know, electrifying, you know, a lot of things on campus, and so our electrical consumption is going to go way up. And if we want to get to net zero, we got to find a supply of zero carbon electricity, and yeah, the market might not be able to deliver that in the conventional way. So looking at some alternatives, but yeah.
That's fascinating and really appreciate. I mean, I understand the larger institutions have different capabilities and access to different, options. So really appreciate you being on board, because I think, you guys do bring expertise and that size that will really help. So, we'll be able to learn from some of the approaches you've taken, I think, and the sophistication of UC's approach. So excellent. I appreciate that. Claudine, look forward to working with you. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm interested, I guess, more in the process. And so from Muscatchee's Cultural College, I'm more than familiar with collective processes. However, I guess access to services, I think, is more the issue for me. And so I'm here to learn, but also to participate in, I guess, access to those services. So thank you very much for the invite.
You're welcome. Really appreciate, I know it was short notice, but so I really appreciate being able to make the time, and we're happy you're able to participate. I reached out to some of your other colleagues as well, and I know timing didn't quite work. So, maybe we can work together to be able to bring those other folks on board. The smaller institutions, I think, have the potential to benefit, the most from this. I think everybody can, but if we can help you out, that would be great. So thanks for coming. Yes. So I've sent out an agenda. I think it's pretty flexible how we approach this, but there's some decisions, and I really don't know if we'll just raise a hand how we want to approach these different things, but certainly we're going to talk about it and be able to make some choices offline a bit. The first, I think one of the primary decisions we need to make is that one item that's listed first, determine the scope of the business case. So there's different directions that we're talking about. I think that we'll be able to accommodate all those. So I think that where it's appropriate, we can make decisions, do our analysis on electricity, and where it's appropriate, make those decisions on gas. And then specifically to talk about how we want to approach renewables, whether it's core or not. From what I understand of how the CPC has worked things, and I think we can decide how we want it to work. Some institutions don't care about the carbon credits, so they sell those and to reduce their cost. But other institutions within that consortium decide that they want carbon credits when you buy renewable energy, and want to retain those benefits, the environmental benefits. So I think within our group, we can each choose how exactly it work for us. But it also is valuable to understand where each institution is coming from. I could put up a poll of some of these things, but I think it'd be valuable to talk it through first. So, do we see the group only considering opportunities to collectively produce electricity, whether it's through PPAs, or whether we want to also pursue opportunities to collectively purchase electricity and gas? I'm kind of having some of these conversations offline as well, where some institutions are in a place where they don't want to deal with some aspect. They want to focus on PPAs. So I think this is a chance now for us to talk about that and how we see going forward with that. And I'll let you kind of speak up or put your hand up if you'd like to talk to it, what your perspective is, what your institution sees as the scope of the business case. Part of this also is driving, if the broader the business case is, the higher cost it'll be. I think that the benefits will offset that cost and the integration of that cost. So there's been a lot of conversation about how will we pay for it? And there's a couple different options. I think the most likely way is to not pay for that business case up front, although that's a possibility, but to integrate it within the cost that's doled out, allocated on a monthly basis as part of the energy cost, so that I think it might be easier often institutionally to manage the cost that way. But again, your thoughts on that? I think that's what we're here to talk about, some of those aspects. Amy, do you have, I know you've kind of put some thought into this already. Is there some thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I'm happy to share if no one else wants to go yet. So this was a conversation that actually Jason and I were having. Thanks, Jason, for popping on as soon as I said your name. That was good timing. Just around the scope of the actual business case, because when Dwayne presented it to us, I think kind of the top end was 150,000. And we were thinking, well, what he pitched was quite comprehensive, and it was almost like an energy strategy, collective energy strategy. And I think what at least Bow Valley would be interested in is a more straightforward business case on, does a PPA make financial and environmental sense? Sort of a yes or no. And if a PPA makes sense collectively, is it a solar farm or a wind farm? So kind of having that really clear direction of, over the next 20 years, this is the pattern that we're going to see, excuse me, as the grid transitions. So I guess my input would be, I think it would be helpful to limit the scope because that will make the budgeting process for the business case much easier. Pardon me. And to your second point around how to fund the business case, I think from the conversations I've been having, it's probably more straightforward to just have the business case paid up front.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I think we want to keep the decisions as sort of step one, step two. So we're not going into the business case assuming that we're going to move forward with the PPA, but that this is a decision point after the business case has happened, because many of us might need to get buy-in or approval from upper levels of leadership. So maybe I'll leave it there. And I don't know if Jason, you want to add anything to that, because that's kind of related to a conversation you and I are having.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Amy, for showing the courage of going first. That's awesome. So yeah, I guess I would echo kind of what Amy had said is like my gut's telling me, I think if we went for an all-inclusive business case study, I think the consultant's going to come back and say, you know what, it makes sense to aggregate your power and go out collectively, right? Like, so I think we don't need him or her to tell us that. And if we wanted to do that, I think we could do that ourselves. I think where we need the expertise and the input is, like Amy said, is does it make sense to do this VPPA and aggregate our power and approach, and I might not have my wording correctly here, but go to market and approach a developer to partner with or an operator to build and run a renewable facility for 20 plus years. So I think that's where I think Norquest wants to go with this business case. And I would echo kind of what Amy said. My preference would be to pay for the business case up front rather than blend. I'm not a fan of blending things into utility rates. I just want to pay for what we're using and not have a bunch of adders onto that. And I think for Norquest anyways, my recommendation would be we would want to keep the renewable credits that come off of this facility versus selling. That might be a bigger decision within our group. If it becomes somewhat lucrative, I mean, financial additions or extra money is always good, but you know, my recommendation would be to keep the credits. So,
Excellent. No, I think that lays out the options really clearly, and how you're looking at it, and that makes a lot of sense. I can understand exactly where you're coming from, and it's yeah. But do other folks also want to weigh in on this? I think that the idea of breaking off the business case, like you say, and making it discrete decision points, that was something that came up in the presentation and the discussion of it, and you know that makes sense. And then narrowing down that business case to that piece that where we have the concern, where we want to understand what that actually looks like, whether it could lower our costs to enter a long-term contract with renewables. That makes a lot of sense. Does anyone else have an opinion or have questions about the process? I know to some folks it might be quite new, or and so you may have some questions. We can come back to that as well if thoughts come up. Or if if something comes more clear once we ask more questions. Do you want to move on to the next point of the agenda? I mean, we're hearing a consensus from two folks. If we don't hear back that doesn't make sense, I think it's reasonable to assume that that's probably where we're leaning towards. But you can also let me know otherwise.
well, if maybe, I guess, if I can maybe just add, Donald. So I think, you know, Bow Valley, I think we're both saying, hey, we're ready to kind of go to the next step, but we're not big enough. So we need some bigger players here, like Edmonton Public School, McEwen. We need some bigger people to kind of get our load up to make sense, because I think the two of us, it doesn't make sense to go, right? So we're hoping to get somebody to help us out here.
Yes, I agree. I would say that the potential, when I was talking to developers, I think that you're right. Like, there's no question that the higher our volumes, the more negotiating power we have, the lower our cost can be. I would also say, though, that there is potential to still have significant benefit. But that's absolutely our intention. I mean, if the group here were to all put in substantial amounts of load, even if it's a couple years out, that would have a huge impact. So.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, and
Yeah.
Stephen, feel free to correct me. But I had a phone call with Robert yesterday at McEwen, who wasn't able to make it today. But yeah, so it sounds like McEwen is at least interested in exploring a business case as well. So it sounds like there's 3 that might be interested.
Absolutely. No, excellent. Yeah, and I totally understand that getting kind of more information. And I think that's exactly what both Amy and Jason are kind of calling for is let's do this in a really measured, paced way. We'll go to that next stage, minimize the cost by making the scope really focused. And we'll get a bid from them. We're going to get a cost estimate of what doing this specific piece of it will be. And then you'll be able to make a decision and ask questions about what that process would be. So by saying this is what we want to do, I actually don't think at this point you're going to commit any dollars. You're committing to say, what will this cost? And the second piece of that, you'll provide some load data, which I think is pretty straightforward. The non-disclosure is just meant to keep the process on board. So it's pretty minimal. And it, signing those documents, the letter of intent, doesn't commit you. It just gives take that next step. So I think that's exactly where we all want to go. Did you want to comment on that, Stephen? Or
No, I think we're on the right track here.
I can't hear you.
Donald, your audio seems a bit off, but you can't hear me, can you?
Can't hear anyone. That's okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Donald. You kind of changed, something changed with your audio.
Changed.
It sounds like you're gargling.
We'll see. I hope that we can hear me all right.
Can you
But
hear
I
us?
think your statement in the chat, makes sense, Stephen. So I guess we'll hear from everyone. You'll be able to kind of make your choice in that regard. And then if the group's large enough, hopefully, I think regardless, we can get that information. Whatever the size of the group, we can find out what the cost of the business case will be, and then find out what the cost of signing up for a PPA will be, and make those choices as we go. So again, the second point then is agreeing that institutions will commit to proceeding with the business case by October 7th. So, you're going to need to go back. And again, it won't cost anything, but you will have to provide some data. The institution will have to sign a letter of intent, and we'll send out what that looks like. And obviously, you're going to do some back and forth, maybe on legal on what exactly that looks like. But the institutions who are interested in moving ahead will be able to, and ask the questions then once that business case is prepared. What I would say too is if we do take a really narrow scope to that business case, I think that's going to make the process go much more, it's going to go as quickly as possible. So Dwayne was saying with that full kind of process and a more comprehensive business case, it could take into December or January. I think if we scale it back, what we're requiring of that business case, and we get the information, the consumption, the information to him, it'll make that relatively fast. I would recommend, and maybe you can have some feedback on this, that we're looking specifically at a PPA and potentially renewables. Would we also still want to include our gas consumption so that we can start that process as well, or do we want to exclude that? Okay. Go ahead, Daryl.
Amy, did you have your hand up still?
I did, and sorry, I need to leave in a couple of minutes. Do you mind if I just share, Daryl?
I'm not hearing you,
Please.
Daryl. Are you? No, if it's
sorry, just to that point around the decision point for October 7th. So recognizing that the FAC meeting is happening October 13th and 14th, I think that'll give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more in detail as well. So I'm wondering if we should push that decision date by a few weeks to have that time to to talk in person, because it'll probably be a better way to answer some questions. So, and the other thing I just want to kind of highlight about that decision point, the reason I think it might be helpful to have folks say yes or no to the business case, or at least show interest, is we getting a quote for the number of institutions will change the business case. So what I'm trying to say is if 10 institutions are interested versus 3, that's going to change the cost of the business case. So once we know sort of the general ballpark of institutions that are at least interested in exploring a business case, then we can get a much more precise quote. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because people don't want to commit before they know the cost, right? So it's almost like we need to indicate, are you just at least interested in exploring a business case, yes or no, maybe by October 21st, so that we can get a proper quote. And I think the reason why that's important is if it's over 75,000, of course, we'll need to go out for competitive bid for that business case as well. So I think there's just a few sort of process pieces that need to happen. But yeah, my idea would be to push it after the FAC. And I see Charlene and Stephen both mentioned that in the chat. So I'm sorry, I have to leave, but I hope this is a generative conversation. Charlene's here, so she'll step up to speak up.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, when is the FAC, when's it scheduled to happen?
October, 2 weeks from now, October, I think it's 12th
Thursday,
to 14th.
Thursday and
Yeah.
Friday, 13, 14.
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent opportunity. And that's not very far away. So no, that makes a lot of sense. Excellent. And it's such a good place to kind of make this opportunity known to as many folks as possible as well, and talk about it more formally. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it seems like we're coming to some strong kind of conclusions about the process we want to follow. And I think that it's really going to be, it's a great way to coordinate it. One of my questions is some of the institutions, so the FAC would not include the school boards, I don't think, does it?
No, it's only the post-secondary institutions.
But I think, yeah, but still aligning the process for your post-secondaries, and then maybe having a bit of a conversation along with the public schools and separate school board. Are the Indigenous, like I've reached out, and that's how we, I think she may have dropped off, but Claudine attended. There's about 5 colleges that are kind of listed on the Alberta post-secondary website as Indigenous colleges. Are those also included in FAC? Do you know? Oh, hi, Claudine.
Hi, no, we're not. And so
Okay.
I think there's an opportunity to discuss that, and that's why I'm here. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a number of different issues. Excellent. So because what I'm seeing as, I mean, those institutions aren't so big either, but so they can benefit even more from this, and starting to include them in these decision-making processes, and the potential to have savings is going to be really valuable, and quite frankly is a benefit to the group if we can include them. I think that when we go to negotiate, when we go to access funding, their participation and inclusion will be really powerful. So again, thanks, Claudine, for being able to attend and help us kind of make that case. Daryl, please go ahead.
Hello again, everybody. Yeah, just wanted to make our position a little more clear. Not that I'm speaking on behalf of procurement or management, but yes, keep it simple. Just electricity focus right now, not gas at the moment. Electricity is our top priority, and especially for efforts of decarbonizing. You have to green that power, as others have said. Our traditional way of doing procurement is multi-step. I'd say there's at least 3 clear steps. We have to determine, there's going to be a competition. Who's going to be our energy advisor? We usually have one before we go out to contracts. That's a competitive process. It can't be a sole source. There's going to be a pre-qualification of vendors to make sure that they are tall enough to ride, as we like to joke. And from that pre-qualified list, then you would be going out for, their best prices. So it's kind of in the last couple stages that would change for us. And I'm just not sure how that shifts. This is all new to me and new to our procurement, I imagine. So we are likely going to be looking for a new energy advisor that has an understanding of some of the things we've been talking about, VPPAs, PPAs, the difference between them, all that, but consortium purchase, aggregation of volume, that what that means in the marketplace. And of course, what's near and dear to most people here is how easily, how can we make it more easy to work together? Is there some redundancies and that can be eliminated and savings to be had in that initial process? I'm going to really need to work with other procurement experts to lead us through all that. I'm just an energy geek after all, so I'll just leave it there.
Excellent. No, that provides some really important perspective. Thank you very much. Particularly Edmonton Public School Board, obviously you guys are huge purchasers, so I understand that your processes are going to be significant, and we need to be able to accommodate those, because having you on board will make the whole will make everything work better in the end, and that's where we need to focus. Charlene, would you like to talk?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Daryl. Our processes aren't too much different. I mean, we're all under the MASH sector legislation of the new West Trade Partnership Agreement and everything else. We all have to follow very similar processes. Donald, I'm just a little bit more curious if you could help me out. I truly appreciate everything you've done bringing this team together and looking at everything that you're doing and coordinating all of the meeting with the consultants that we've had and so forth. I'm going forward. Help me understand how sustainable Campus Collaborative works with this, because you're either doing this off of a side of a desk somewhere, or you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart, which I love, but I don't want a bill I'm not expecting later on. So can you help me figure out how going forward you fit into this and costs associated or whatever that we need for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar to what I've been doing with SEC. I haven't been paid. It's been out of the goodness of my heart, and it's with the assumption that if the value of what I'm doing is recognized, that the role will become more institutionalized, and so my hope is that when I've had discussions with consultants who will do the energy work, they won't have any work to do if they don't have some customers. If they have some customers, then they'll get paid, and I'll get paid quite maybe somewhat retroactively, but certainly in the future. My role coordinating this, finding new potential partners, such as the folks I've reached out to at the St. Albert School Board and some of the other separate municipal school boards and the Indigenous colleges. It wouldn't happen without me. And if there's value to having done that work, and there is real financial value to having done that work, you guys save millions of dollars, that we'll find a way to financially compensate me. Ultimately, I don't know if that's actually going to happen. So it's certainly taking a huge risk. But ultimately as well, if it's my not-for-profit work and I make people's lives a bit better, and those folks are fine, well, yeah, great, he did that, but too bad for him, we'll take advantage of that. That'd be really disappointing, but I also know that that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think you just need to be cautious of that because from a post-secondary institution, I mean, any of the other post-secondaries, please step up if I'm speaking out of line from your perspective. But it's awfully hard to compensate a consultant after the fact, after all the work has been done, if there's been no formal agreement, contract, anything set out in place prior to the work happening. So I just don't want to go down that path, Donald, and you have a bunch of post-secondaries that maybe not be able to reimburse you in any way whatsoever because it didn't follow the proper process. So I just want you to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and any advice about how, I mean, the fact is, I don't think that beforehand I came and said, okay, let's try to do this and will you guys pay me? I'm not sure that that's a possibility, quite frankly, either. It just wouldn't then happen, at least not through the work that I've been doing. So yeah, I have not figured out exactly how that financial issue can be resolved, but I'm also, if I'm not going to get compensated directly for the work that I've done in the past, I would even more feel terrible is if I didn't get to be part of the process to come to culmination, because at the very least, if I can still help in a coordinating role and not get compensated for it, it's something that I can put on my resume and, in the future, find other ways to monetize that work that I've done. So I also would hope that you guys won't cut me out when, I hand the process and the opportunity on a silver platter and say, oh, we can take this and run. And yeah, take care, Donald. Because at least if I'm part of the conclusion of it and seeing this through, I have at least that experience and that insight into how this works and can work on that. So yeah.
All right. Thanks for sharing.
But I appreciate the question, and I hope I'm being completely frank because I don't really see any benefit to not doing that. But yeah, just I'm not getting paid by anybody right now. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's 9:15. We've gone through quite a few of the items. The final one is around governance structure. So I think we're seeing that emerge. I mean, really appreciate Bow Valley College and Northwest, and to some degree, obviously other folks taking up some of the leadership, saying, okay, this is the process we'll follow. These are decisions we need to make. And so I think that's naturally happening. Really appreciate that. And as much as possible, if you can feed to me, if there's questions that come out of that. So I don't know if we need to formally identify board members if we understand, the process is, if it's going to go through FAC, I think there is a bit of a formal structure to that and the way decisions are made. And we know we'll need to follow our purchasing rules and start to try to help those, adapt and be efficient under a collective energy procurement. Is there anything that the group wants to talk about in terms of governance? There's some specific things that would need to happen. We need to either formally make decisions as part of CPC or kind of separately have a structure to manage the financial aspects of this. If we go to a group tender for an energy consultant or for the business case, the energy consultant is separate, but the business case, we may need a kind of collective financial structure, but I think you guys have some idea about how that would work, and maybe FAC could help facilitate that. Do we have ideas about that, or how we'd want to approach that? Take care, Earl. Thanks very much.
I guess I would just say maybe it might be hard, I think, until we figure out who's all interested, Donald, right? Like, I think we need to see who's in and then figure out of that group, or if we're not big enough to go alone, people join up with the CPC. There's probably already existing structure in place that we just kind of piggyback on. So that would be my thoughts.
That makes sense. So once we kind of get that commitment to go ahead with the business case from a number of institutions by October 21st, and after discussion at FAC in a couple of weeks, then that structure will start to just be self-evident. That makes sense. And we'll work it out then. Perfect. I think that actually resolves. Are there any other questions? We had that agenda. We've talked through some of the more pressing issues. And I think we have an approach, which is excellent. And so what I'll do is I'll document it. I might send out to a few of you just a review that I've got it kind of right. And then we can send it to the broader group. And we can see, how it actually shakes out. Hopefully quite a few institutions. It wouldn't take that many, but some key institutions can kind of take this up and go ahead. Anything else anybody wants to discuss now or bring up? Well, excellent. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I think it was an extremely productive discussion. So appreciate that. Take care, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Donald.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Donald, for
bye-bye.
meeting us.
You're welcome.